You guys look good this morning. Like you look like you're excited to be here. You didn't have to drag yourself out of bed, and you're ready to go. And I'm glad to see you, and I'm glad that you're here. Peyton Manning had already established himself as one of the all-time greats in the NFL. Most people considered him to be one of the top 3 quarterbacks of all time. He had had a great career with the Indianapolis Colts. He'd been to 2 Super Bowls. He had won one of them. And now he had moved to another team. And he was getting ready to cement his legacy by winning another Super Bowl because his team, the Denver Broncos, were about to play in Super Bowl 48 against the Seattle Seahawks. Everybody expected this was going to be the one Manning would easily win, the Broncos would easily win. They had had a season for the record books. Their team had scored more points than any other team in NFL history. Peyton Manning had broken almost every single season passing record. And what really matters, the Las Vegas odd makers had them as big favorites over the Seahawks. And then the game started. And on the very first play of the game, there was a miscommunication. The Broncos center snapped the ball over Peyton Manning's head into the end zone. His team had to push it out of the back of the end zone for a safety. And one play into the game, they were already losing 2-0. And it didn't get better from there. By the end of the first quarter, he had already thrown 1 interception, and the team had gone and scored a touchdown after that. And then on the very next possession, he threw a second interception, this one run back 67 yards for another touchdown, and things were beginning to spiral out of control. When the teams came out for the second half, the very first kickoff of the half was run back for a touchdown by the Seahawks, and the route was on. It was 29-0, and it wouldn't get any closer. You might say that Peyton Manning had a bad day. It started bad, and it only got worse as it went. Have you ever had a day like that? I mean, sometimes we just have a day, it gets off to a bad start, and it never gets better. That's how life goes sometimes. And what do you do when it seems like it just goes from bad to worse? Or what if it's just your life? Like what if your life is like that? Start here, and then it goes bad, and then it goes even badlier and badlier and badlier. And it just keeps getting worse and worse. This is Joseph. So Joseph is a character in the Bible in Genesis, and this is his life. It starts in a fairly decent place, and there's really high hopes and expectations, but then it starts to go bad, and then it just spirals out of control bad. So bad you can't even imagine how bad it's going to get. And we're going to take the next month to study this guy, Joseph, all right? Let me give you a little bit of context about his life first so you understand where he sits in the story. We've been talking about Abraham. God came to Abraham and said, Abraham, I'm going to bless you. You're going to have multiple descendants. They're going to be like the sand on the sea, the stars in the skies, and through you, all people on earth will be blessed. And then Abraham had 2 sons, Isaac and Ishmael. Ishmael was his son through his servant Hagar, and Isaac was the son of the promise. Right? It's through Isaac that all of God's promises would be fulfilled to Abraham. And then Isaac had 2 sons. They were twins, Jacob and Esau. Esau is the older son, but Jacob is the son of the promise. Now, every time I say son of the promise, what I'm saying is it's through this son that Jesus is ultimately going to come. Remember, we trace this all the way back to Eve, where God made a promise to Eve, through one of your descendants, I'm going to fix everything that you've messed up. The same promise was to Abraham. And the Old Testament is the story of how we trace that promise all through the history of God's people until it gets to Jesus. And so that goes through Abraham, it goes through Isaac, it goes through Jacob. And then Jacob had 12 sons. He had 12 sons with 4 moms. So he had 2 wives and 2 concubines. So you can imagine this is probably a little bit of a dysfunctional home. And it was incredibly dysfunctional. One of these sons is Joseph. He's the second youngest of the group. Now, Joseph is not the son of the promise. Judah is actually the son of the promise, which is fascinating because Judah is not a good guy. And it's a reminder to us that God can even work through bad people, which is super comforting to me because I would put myself in that category. And God can actually work through me even when I'm flawed. But the story of Genesis follows Joseph because it's in the life of Joseph that we see God's plan unfolding, even though Joseph is going to go through some really difficult stuff. He's going to go through some real testing, and what we'll discover as we see the story of Joseph unfold is that our character is revealed through testing. We'll see That Joseph is a guy who, even though life goes badly, he continues to trust God. And his character is revealed as someone who trusts God and is obedient to God and follows God even when it's difficult. This morning, we're going to kind of introduce the story. We'll meet Joseph and we'll meet his brothers, and we'll be able to compare them to each other. And I think there will be some powerful lessons for us as we think about how we deal with the testing in life by watching what Joseph and his brothers do. So let's jump in. This is in Genesis 37, starting in verse 3. It says, "Now Israel," that's Jacob. So God changed Jacob's name to Israel. "Now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons." And this is a warning sign for us, right? Because this is bad parenting. Parents, listen, you shouldn't have favorites. And if you do, you shouldn't tell your kids, okay? But he doesn't care. He's going to tell his kids. And so you can imagine with 12 brothers, if they know that one of them is favored, that's going to cause some problems, right? And it does. So Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. All right, we'll come back to the brothers in a second and talk about what this means. But let's focus on Joseph just for a second. Because what we can see about Joseph at this point is that he's got it all. Joseph has everything that he should need in order to be happy, if we can be happy from the things of the world. And so there's three words we can use. The first one is possessions. A lot of times we look to our possessions to make us happy, don't we? Like the stuff we have. In our minds, we tell ourselves this story: if I just had a little bit more, then I'd be happy. Or if I just had this one thing, then I'd be happy. Or I would be fulfilled if I could just have this. We look to our possessions to make us happy, and Joseph had that. You know, we may say, well, it's only a coat of many colors, but it had many colors, right? It was a really cool coat, and it symbolized something else. It symbolized that his dad was willing to give him anything. His dad was a wealthy man, one of the wealthiest men in the region, and he was willing to give Joseph anything and everything he wanted. So Joseph had possessions. And Joseph had popularity. This is something else that we often look to for fulfillment in life. We want to be popular. We want to be liked. And sometimes in our minds we think, if people would just like me, then I would be good to go. And I know some of you are saying, wait a minute, David, doesn't that verse say that his brothers hated him? So why are you saying that he's popular? It's because he's popular with the right person. He's popular with his father. He's loved by the most important person. And this is really what we do. Oftentimes in our minds, we say, I don't care what everybody thinks of me. Like, there are people, I don't care what they think of me. As long as the important people like me, as long as the important people affirm me and accept me, then I'm going to be good to go, and then I'm going to be happy. And Joseph had that. He had possessions, he had popularity, he had power. Even though he was one of the youngest, his dad had put him in a position of power. He had influence. He could do what he wanted to do. He had independence. And sometimes for us, this is what we look for in life, right? I just want a little more power. I want a little more control. If I can just control the people around me, or if I can just control my life circumstances, then I will be happy. Then I will feel fulfilled. Joseph has it all. He's got the possessions. He's got the popularity. He's got the power. His life should be perfect, right? But I don't want you to miss this point. By the end of this chapter, Joseph will lose it all. He will lose his possessions. He will lose his popularity. He will lose his power. And the question then is, what will be revealed about his character? Because please hear this. If you are looking to the things of this world to find happiness and fulfillment, you will be sorely disappointed because they will not last. Possessions will not last. Popularity will not last. Power will not last. It all goes away. So if that's where you find meaning in life, you are going to face severe disappointment in life. But let me just be honest with you. You are going to face severe disappointment in life. We all do, right? Part of living in this world that's broken and fallen is that we all have to deal with disappointment from time to time. And that brings us back to the brothers. The brothers hate Joseph. They hate him so much, it says so much that they can't even speak peacefully to him. Which means either every time they have a conversation with Joseph, it ends in yelling and fighting, or that they just give him the silent treatment and they cancel him out of their lives. It's one of the two. Either way, it's not healthy, it's not great. And we look at the brothers and we say, these guys look to be kind of bitter. That might be the best word we can use to describe. They're bitter about life. But let's be fair to them. They're disappointed, rightfully so. How would you feel if your father said, I love your brother more than I love you? And just to make sure you know that, I'm going to give him this really bright coat. So every time you see this coat, you'll be reminded that I love your brother more than I love you. And because the coat is so bright, you can't miss it. So the brothers are living their lives all the time, seeing Joseph, seeing the coat, being reminded that their dad loves him more than their dad loves them. And so they're disappointed in life. They're disappointed by someone who should mean a lot to them. They're disappointed by where their life has gone. And that disappointment leads them into bitterness. But let's trace how that happens, okay? Because I really think this is about their attitude. Now, attitude is not what I think about. Sometimes we think attitude is what I think about. Attitude is not what you think about. Attitude is what you keep thinking about. You can't always control those first thoughts that pop into your mind, right? Those thoughts of disappointment, of frustration, whatever they may be. But you are the only one who can choose what to keep playing in your mind. Let's unpack how this works in the brothers' lives. So the brothers find themselves in this place where something has happened that they don't love. They're disappointed by it. And rightfully so. And so now they begin to compare themselves to Joseph. Because Joseph has something they don't have. Joseph has something they want. Now, every single one of us knows who in our lives or who around us fits this mold, right? Like, there are people in your life that have things that you don't have, right? And there are people in your life who have things that you want. This is an unavoidable truth of life. And that can be disappointing. And it can be easy to look at those people and say, why do they get what I don't get? Why do they have what I don't have? And the more I replay this in my mind, the more I begin to tell myself a story, not that they have what I don't have, but that I don't have enough. Because I compare myself to them, and I think they're the standard. If they're the standard of what I should have, and I don't have what they have, and they have what I want, then I don't have enough. But the reality is, it's not that I don't have enough, it's that I have different. And so what I need to learn how to do is make this shift in my thinking that when I begin to compare myself to others, when I begin to look at others and see they have what I don't have or they have what I want, instead of me going down this road that leads to jealousy and to thinking I don't have enough, I need to choose gratitude. First of all, why not be grateful for them? God, I am so glad that you gave this to them. God, I'm glad that you, in your plan, understand that they need that more than I do, so thank you for providing them with their needs. And then I can be grateful for what I have, right? And God, even though you didn't give me that, thank you for all that you have given me, because he has given you a lot. When we choose to run down the road of comparison and dwell on comparison, when we keep thinking about what others have, it leads us to a dark place. You know, for much of my life, maybe not much anymore, I'm older than I think. For a long time in my life, I wanted to play basketball in the NBA. Now, you guys who know me know that like soccer is actually my sport, but it wasn't always that way. For a long time in my life, basketball was my game. I loved basketball. I was the kid, remember I grew up in Michigan, I would go outside in January and shovel a foot of snow off the driveway just so I could shoot free throws. I loved basketball. I played all the time. Any chance I got, I was playing basketball. I was watching basketball. I was reading in the newspaper about basketball. If you don't know what a newspaper is, ask the person next to you. They'll explain it to you. But I loved basketball. And it wasn't until about middle school that I realized I'm not sure that God created me to play basketball. Because there's something that basketball players have that I don't have. Height. And I am lacking it severely. Now here's the deal. I could let that ruin the rest of my life, right? I'm just going to be bitter with God for the rest of my life because he didn't make me tall enough to play in the NBA. Or I can simply say, God must have something different for me. He gave me something different, so he must have something different for me. This is the choice we all must make when we're disappointed. Am I going to run down this path of comparison? Because here's where it leads. And we can see this in the brothers. That comparison leads to jealousy. And the jealousy leads to hatred. We see all of that in this first verse. And what we'll see by the end of the chapter is that the brothers' dark path leads them from comparison to jealousy, to hatred, and ultimately to violence. You see, when we allow ourselves to dwell on what we don't have and listen to the narrative that we don't have enough, it always leads to harm for us and the people around us. And so the challenge for all of us this morning is to think about the disappointments that we face in life and how we will handle those disappointments. Will we handle them like the brothers, or will we handle them like Joseph? Well, let's keep going with this story. Verse 12. Now, his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel, that's Jacob, said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." And he, that's Joseph, said to him, "Here I am." Now, if you were here last week, you know that's a significant phrase, right? That's the same words that Abraham said. When God came to Abraham, he said, "Abraham, I want you to take your son, whom you love, your only son, take him to a place I'm going to show you, and sacrifice him there to me." Abraham's response was, "Here I am." And then later in the story, when God intervened and said, "Abraham, stop, don't lay a hand on your son," again, Abraham said, "Here I am." These are the words of someone who is available, someone who is willing to obey. And this is what Joseph is saying to his father. He's saying, "I will obey you in what you're asking me to do." Because don't miss that this is a hard thing he's asking him to do. Joseph knows his brothers don't like him. And now his dad is sending him to check up on them. We don't like that. We don't like when someone gets sent to check up on us. Remember when you were in elementary school and the teacher would leave the room for a minute? And the teacher would be like, "Okay, Johnny, you're in charge until I get back. You tell me if anybody does anything wrong." And immediately we all hate Johnny, right? Johnny didn't do anything, but we hate Johnny because Johnny's checking up on all of us. So this is the brothers with Joseph, and Joseph understands this. And even though Joseph knows this isn't going to be easy, his response is, "Here I am, I will obey." And like Abraham that we saw last week, Joseph's obedience is immediate and it's complete. Joseph goes to Shechem, which would have taken him at least a full day to walk there. And when he gets there, the brothers aren't there. It would have been very easy at this point for Joseph to say, "I really don't want to do this anyways. Those guys don't like me. They won't even talk to me. This is going to make things worse. They're not here. Why don't I just go home to Dad and say, 'Dad, I went to Shechem and I couldn't find him.'" That would have been the easy thing to do, to make an excuse, to take the easy way out. But Joseph instead does the research. He finds out where his brothers are and has to walk a whole nother day until he can find them. Because listen, true obedience is complete obedience. Sometimes we're willing to obey God to a certain extent, right? Like, I'm willing to do what God asked me to do up to a point. And do you know where that point usually is? When it starts to cost me my possessions. Or when it starts to cost me my popularity. Or when it starts to cost me my power. Or when it's going to cost me anything that I'm relying on for my own happiness and my own contentment and my own satisfaction. And then I say, "I will obey up to here but no further," but not Joseph. Joseph's obedience is full and complete. And so what we expect is God's going to reward him for that, right? Because Joseph is being obedient and fully and completely obedient, our expectation is that God's going to say, "Well, I'm going to bless you now. Joseph, your life's going to get really good now." Because when we obey God, we expect our lives to get better. In fact, sometimes we bargain with God this way, right? "Okay, God, I'm going to obey you. I'm going to do this, but my life better get better for it. Did you know that's not what the Bible teaches? You know, the Bible doesn't make that promise to us that if I do what God says, then he'll do what I say. In fact, sometimes it's the exact opposite of that. Let's see what happens to Joseph here. They saw him from afar. This is verse 18. And before he came, so understand, they can see him from afar because he's wearing that coat. Right? I mean, it's like there's this neon coat coming up the road. It must be Joseph. And so they see him, and not only is it, hey, we see him, but it's like, oh, he's wearing that coat again. That coat that we hate. And he's wearing it. Before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. So this is really escalating. They're going to kill their brother. They said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. So this is where the brothers' trajectory has led them. Because this is what happens inside of us when we hold on to bitterness, when we cling to bitterness. It grows up inside us and it changes us and it destroys us from the inside out. Imagine being in a place where you're like, let's just kill our brother because we don't like him. Now, something's going to happen here, but when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, let us not take his life. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood, throw him into this pit here in the wilderness. Now, the pit is an empty well. Like at one point there was water in it, but it's dried up now. And so it's like a big hole in the ground. And they took him, oh, I'm too far ahead. Shed no blood, throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father. Now, don't think that Reuben's a good guy here. He's not, okay? It looks like he's doing a good thing, but really what he's doing is he's trying to manipulate the situation for his own gain. Right now, Reuben is out of his father's good graces. He's done some really horrible things. His father is really angry with him, and Reuben sees this as an opportunity to get back on Dad's good side because Reuben's at the top of the food chain. And if Dad likes him, when Dad dies, Reuben gets everything because the oldest gets everything. But if Dad is mad at him, Reuben gets nothing. So Reuben's trying to restore his place in the pecking order by using Joseph. If Reuben actually was a good guy and trying to do the right thing, at this moment he would have said to his brothers, hey guys, don't you think we're overreacting just a little? You know, maybe it's not the right thing to kill our brother. That's not what he says. He's like, let me see if I can manipulate the situation for my own good. Verse 23. So, when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore. And they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat. Like, this last phrase is here to show us something, right? Every word of the Bible is inspired. God's showing us something. He wants us to see what kind of people the brothers are. I mean, imagine being able to throw your brother in a pit and then just go and have a sandwich. Because we'll learn later in the story, they could actually hear Joseph crying out during this time. Like he's down in the bottom of this well, yelling for help, crying, and in utter despair, his brothers can hear him, and they're like, hey, let's have lunch. And it's probably the lunch that Joseph brought them. Because Joseph's father probably sent food for the brothers. And so they just sit here eating while their brother is suffering. And again, this is here to show us what happens when we allow that bitterness to grow up inside of us to destroy us from the inside out. We become people who are uncaring, who are calloused, who don't see others. When life's disappointments come, if you choose to be bitter, if you choose to dwell on the pain and the disappointment, if you choose to look at what you don't have and that you don't have enough, this is where it will lead you. You will end up like the brothers. Now, things aren't going so swimming for Joseph either right now. He has now lost everything. He's lost his possessions. The robe is gone. He's lost his popularity. He's a long ways from Dad, and the brothers hate him. and he's lost his power. He has no control over his own situation at all. But there's good news. And the good news is this: God's plan is never derailed. And even though all seems lost for Joseph right now, God knows exactly what he's doing. God has a plan for Joseph. And even though Joseph has lost everything that he thought would make him happy, he's still exactly where he needs to be, right smack in the middle of God's plan. And so now we say, okay, great, God has a plan. So now things are going to get better, right? Now the tide is going to turn. Everything is going to get better. Joseph is going to be all right. Things are going to go great now, right? Because God's plan is never derailed. Nope. In fact, it's about to get worse. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not let our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers listened to him. So again, Judah's not a good guy here, right? He's not looking out for Joseph. What he's saying to the brothers is, hey guys, I think it's a good idea for us to kill him. I'm down for that. But if we just kill him and then bury him somewhere, what do we get out of that? But if we sell him, we all get a little bit of money. And the brothers are like, you know what? We get rid of him either way. Why not get rich? So then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. So things are not getting better. In fact, things have just gotten exponentially worse. Now Joseph is not headed back towards his father. He's headed the opposite direction, and he's in chains. And when he gets to Egypt, he's going to be sold into slavery. And here's where we say, wait a minute, David, I thought you said God's plan doesn't get derailed. This sure feels like derailed. And do you think that as Joseph walked into the desert in chains with strangers, not knowing where he was going or what was going to happen, do you think that Joseph felt a little bit derailed? I want you to hear this. In life sometimes, we will be disappointed. In life sometimes, things will not go where we want them to go. Because we live in a broken, fallen world, and we're surrounded by broken, fallen people, and sometimes they will mistreat us, and sometimes they will do things that we don't want them to do, and sometimes all of that is outside of our control, but it is not outside of God's control. And God's plan is not derailed. Even when it feels like it, even when you can't see clear, God still knows what he's doing. And here's why. Because that pit that Joseph was in is ultimately going to lead him to Egypt. And getting to Egypt is going to lead him to Potiphar. And leading him to Potiphar is going to lead him to prison. And that doesn't sound great either. But leading to prison will ultimately lead him to Pharaoh. And getting to Pharaoh means that at just the right time, for just the right reason, Joseph will be in just the right place to not just save his whole family, but to save the whole world. Now, it's going to take a lot of time. And between here and there, there's going to be a lot of disappointment. But God knows what he is doing. And God's plan is never derailed. And what's amazing in all of this, and we're going to continue to see this in the coming weeks, is that in all of this, we never see Joseph grow bitter. We only see him get better. And it's because he has this faith that God is with him. Because God is with him. And Joseph, in many ways, reminds us of Jesus. In fact, in all of the Old Testament, I think that Joseph might be the clearest picture of Jesus that we have. Think about what we've seen already. Joseph is loved by the Father. He's sent to the brothers who reject him. He's sold for silver, just like Jesus was. And what we'll see in the coming weeks is that he will be falsely accused, he'll be put in the ground, but he'll be resurrected. And he will rescue and save his brothers. Because God has a plan. And I want you to understand this, that just as Joseph's suffering led to salvation for his brothers, it is Jesus' suffering that leads to salvation for us. And even if we don't see the whole picture now, or if we don't see the whole picture for years, what we can know without a doubt today is that God is in control, and because of Jesus, God will work all things together for good. That sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Because we love that verse from Romans. Romans 8:28 says that we know that all things work together for good, for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. You see, that was the promise that Joseph had, that even in the pit, all things were going to work together for good. Even on the walk to Egypt, all things were going to work together for good. And that's the promise that we have today. And notice this about this promise. The power of the promise is unlimited. It's for all. There is not a situation you can find yourself in life that sits outside of this promise, because all means all, and that's all means, right? Everything in your life will work together for good. The power of this promise is unlimited, but the recipients of this promise are limited. Please see this. This promise is not for everyone. It very clearly says, we know that all things work together for the good of those who love God. This promise is not for those who do not love God. Those who have not given themselves to him, those who have not made him the Lord of their life, those who have not put their faith in Jesus, this promise is not for them. And please hear this. If you are here this morning and you have not given your life to God, I cannot promise you that things will work together for good, because they will not. Because the day will come at the end of your life when you stand before God, the righteous judge, and if you do not belong to Jesus, it will not work for good on that day. And there is not a better time than right now to fix that. Right now, you can give yourself to him. Turn your life over to Jesus. Trust in him as your Savior, as the one who died for you. And then you can know that this promise is for you. That no matter where this life takes you, you may lose all of your possessions. You may lose all of your popularity. You may lose all of your power. But if you have Jesus, you have everything you need. And when you find yourself in eternity, you will forever and ever be in the presence of God. So if that's you today, do not delay. For those of us who love God, this is a powerful promise, because it reminds us that all of the benefits of Jesus' sacrifice are applied to us. And sometimes we experience some of those benefits in this life, but that's just a taste. That's just a foreshadowing. That's just a down payment on what is yet to come in eternity. And so we need to encourage ourselves in the difficult times, in the times of disappointment, when it feels like life is spiraling out of control. We need to remind ourselves that all will work together for good, and all will work together for good because of Jesus.